So we're going to talk about Dehaka. Now, I want to preface all this is that there's two things about Dehaka, is that he's not an every game hero. There's certain maps where he's really going to excel on, other ones where he's going to look really bad on. And also, there's a lot of newer heroes that have kind of surpassed Dehaka, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. And one of the most important things, and I should say this about every hero, but as a melee, you have to be very comfortable with auto attacking and A moving, because if you can't do that with Dehaka, you're hurting yourself and you're making your character even worse, thus making yourself a liability. It goes without saying that his drag is a very long stun because it's 1.75 seconds. You can get the movement speed through the bush and really try and get onto people or drag them with you. That's all well and good. This is a 15-second cooldown. One of your talents will bring this down to a much easier time, but it's very easy to dodge this versus a Dehaka, which is what makes Dehaka subpar. This is pretty much the only form of CC he has. So you really have to focus on what Dehaka actually brings to the table. It's obvious the global is there. If you've watched the Falstad video, you know that when I talk about globals, you can't be late to fights. And if you are late to fights, your team better know why or what you're doing. And you have to learn when that is. You have to know where to go, especially as Dehaka, because the only time he can get there is in a bush. And you have to decide, am I going behind the enemy team, or am I just getting to the fight to where I want to be there for my team? As tanky as Dehaka is, if you have to use a lot of your resources, just by getting into the back of the team and you don't land a drag, it's pretty brutal because you don't bring a lot else to the fight. But we'll talk about some of the ways that you can survive in there and be more effective as a Dehaka, because it's all about the drag. Of course, his W, fantastic wave clear, actually some of the best in the game. Post 13, really good. But this also can really help you do stuff, including move through targets, which we'll get out of the way now before we get into the talents. That if you come in and your team is on this side, their team is here in the middle, and you come in from behind, it is perfectly acceptable because you want to make sure and get back to your side. Imagine it like an ETC power slide. Ideally, you'd like to be on your team side. You want to land your drag, then press W, not just for damage, but so that you can now path through them. So you want to W, Q, and then get through them. You want to make sure that you can get through the enemy and get there. There's multiple ways of going about that. But getting through the enemy team, if I land the drag and I can't get to the other side, that's a little scary. So you want to make sure that you get your W active if you do come from the enemy side. So even if you miss your drag, you can now go through the enemy back to your side. That's one of the most important parts of this talent or this ability that a lot of people get wrong. Also, you can hurt yourself in this situation as well, that if you use your W early, the enemy team can walk through you, and then now they can body block you. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I can promise you that much is that I've used this versus Dehakas in the past. It's like they W'd early. I'm just going to walk through that, eat minimal damage, and then I'm going to body block them because now they can't get through. These are small tricks that you start to pick up on over time. It's kind of hard to go into the specifics of when that's going to happen, but don't just think of your W as damage. And that's the best way I can tell you. Don't just think of your W as damage. Think about it as mobility. This is the only form of mobility you have other than the movement speed. You can combine them. You can use them separately. You can use them offensively. You can use them defensively. You have to start tuning that into your mind on using that and think about it not as damage, but as mobility. Damage second, mobility first. Once you start to do that, you'll start to figure out you might be able to do more damage when you start to add things in. Your burrow goes without saying. You can go into stasis, become invulnerable, dodge big skill shots, dodge things that are going to one-shot you, and furthermore down the road. Of course, with your essence, that's what we're going to play around. And with that being said, we're going to talk about the talents now. Now, a long time ago, movement speed was the hot. Everybody knew race car Dehaka. If you weren't around then, it was kind of crazy. It still is a lot of movement speed. But for the general purpose of playing Dehaka, getting extra essence is going to help you out in multiple ways. Regeneration globes grant 10 essence, which can also help. Essence means heals. Essence down the road, if you go into a certain build variation, can also mean more damage. And these are things that you want to remember when you're playing Dehaka, is that you can essentially have a second life bar as a Dehaka, and that makes things a lot more favorable in a fight because if you don't land your drag and you're hard to kill, you're still there doing things. It's like an Artanis that doesn't go Q build. Yeah, you're there. You're not doing a lot. The cool thing for Dehaka is you can go a talent that allows you to do more, get auto attacks in and everything else, which is why I say you have to auto attack. For what it's worth, Dehaka does have pretty decent auto attacks given that he's more of a bruiser role. We were checking earlier, it's about 105, I believe, at level 1. Plus, you have a 1.1 attack speed. It's somewhere in that range, which means more cooldown reduction later and more overall DPS. So you want to make sure, again, to my earlier point, to have that auto attack damage. Tissue regeneration allows you to stay in a fight longer. You get more essence. Of course, the globes helping you out. Takedowns help you out as well. We'll let this play through. Salmira, welcome to the JHow. Using that Twitch Prime 2 months now. Appreciate it. I hope I remember to edit this later. Welcome to the JHow. So we have seen a lot of buffs over time to Endurance Swarm, and there used to be a build that was W build to get cooldown reduction, to be able to do a lot with that. I don't like this. Unless you're going against a triple ranged damage team, I still don't think it's that great because you can do more with your second health bar through your essence. You can do more with that over time as opposed to the spell armor. And if you're picking Dehaka to have 50 spell armor and then go W cooldown reduction later, you're essentially doing Artanis things when you don't pick damage. You're living forever. Nobody's going to deny the fact that you're living back there and you're auto attacking like a maniac. You'll occasionally get some W damage, but you're not impacting the fight as much as you could. And you have to be willing to commit to, look, I don't need to survive as much because I have other tools that allow me to do that. And so this is going to be a kind of a setback to what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. Level 4, one who collects, I think, is the most fantastic talent here. There is a place for Hero Stalker if you're on a battle-heavy map. But I'm not a fan of this at all. Your job as Dehaka is to be a global hero, to impact not just a team fight, but the map. If you dominate a team fight, but not the map, you've picked the wrong hero. If you dominate the map and you don't do anything in a team fight, you've picked the wrong hero. I don't care if you push the whole top lane out and you took a fort down. Nobody cares because your team is going to miss you in that team fight and you're trading your heroes' lives. You're trading more XP now for potential XP down the road. And you're setting your team at a handicap. It's nice now. If you do come back in a fight later, then yeah, it's going to look better down the road. But in reality, you need to use that global to be there in a team fight. And one way to utilize that global is to get extra essence from the minions so that when you join a team fight, your value has now skyrocketed because you have an extra health bar. You don't require as many resources. You have different ways of surviving. And one who collects gives you that. Hero Stalker, I think they've buffed this enough to where it could be viable. I'm not going to say I hate it, but I'm going to tell you that in terms of what you should be doing as Dehaka, one who collects will have a greater impact on the game and the team fight overall, which means that you're taking care of both things instead of focusing on one, and that's going to help you. If you're on Battlefield of Eternity and you pick Dehaka, Hero Stalker will be better. The problem is you pick Dehaka on Battlefield of Eternity. Don't do it. Pick somebody else. Don't even think about Lurker Strain, by the way. Level 7. There's only one talent here, and that's Feeding Frenzy. Again, I'm going to reiterate this throughout. You should always be comfortable auto-attacking as every hero in the game. More so with melee heroes. More so with Dehaka now at level 7. I talked about the greater impact you can have on a fight. Remember, 1.11 attack speed, so it's a little better than your normal attack speed, which means more cooldown reduction. This is a 15-second cooldown reduction. They put a 2-second cooldown per auto on this. If you get the full duration of your Q, that's 1.75 seconds, which means that essentially by the time you start auto attacking, it's just over 13 seconds. For lag, we'll say, and for ping, we'll say 13 seconds, which means you want to get at about 6 auto attacks, 5 to 6 auto attacks, which will get you right back and you'll get another one. And if I say 1.11 auto attacks, that means I could potentially have a 1.75 second stun. If that downtime is 13 seconds, I get 5 autos, it's 1.11. Now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at a 6-second downtime on a stun, a very good stun that can help out a lot, and it's also a displacement. Feeding Frenzy is the way to go. I don't even think about the other talents. Don't do it. Don't think about it. Don't think that you're going to go W build and that's how you're going to do damage. Because if you're going down that route and that's your mentality, you should have picked a different hero that will do more damage anyways. Feeding Frenzy, you need to have the impact in the global. You need to have the impact in the team fight. Here's where your team fight impact comes in. You're going to go into a fight. You're going to land your drag. And if you miss your drag, you're going to auto attack. If they focus you down, you can always press D. If you feel like you're going to die instantly, you press D and then you burrow under the ground so that your essence goes off. And then you're coming right back and you're like, ooh, I just got an ancestral healing, actually greater in some certain situations. And then you can go back to auto attacking, and now they've committed a lot of resources. It's your job to impact a fight and to have the global presence, impact the fight, and then not be killable, which is why this build has the synergy that it does. Looking at level 10, for the people that pick adaptation, I ask you why. If you're not landing your drags and you didn't go drag build, it means that you're not doing your job. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Hitting a tongue is really hard. That's why I think one of the reasons why Dehaka is not that great. Not hard in the sense that it's easier to dodge. So if I see a Dehaka on the other team, I can see that windup. It is a very slow windup, and I can dodge that. So if you miss that drag and you've got to auto attack, then yeah, you might need to stay alive longer. If you don't hit that second drag, you'll need adaptation, but it's not good. You should not be picking a hero that you can't play. Isolation has a fantastic single target. You get the damage, you get the slow, you get the silence. If you've ever been isolated, you realize how terrifying that is. You can't see, you're slowed. Am I about to die? Am I not about to die? You're furiously clicking. You have now taken somebody out of a fight. This is a 60-second cooldown, albeit it is a skill shot. It's still something that has a generous width. You can land this. More importantly, the level 20 upgrade is one of the best heroics in the game, and we'll get to that later, but the single target skill shot on a 60-second cooldown should be okay. Think Johanna with this. This also makes it easier for you to land a drag right after. If you can isolate somebody, it's kind of tough to do that, but you want to find different ways to impact a fight. This is the way, not adaptation. Your life in doing that damage is not going to be as great as what you could potentially do with isolation. It's a little riskier, of course, but it's also going to do damage. It's going to help your team. It's going to eliminate one target from the team. I mean, a 3 seconds silence. 3 second silence. That's insane. Use isolation. Don't think about adaptation. There are very few circumstances where it's like, I just need to survive, and then we can win the fight, maybe against an Abathur team where that's going to happen. A team that you're waiting out, bloodlust, if it rarely comes up. Those are moments where it's like, I just need to survive the onslaught, then my team wins no matter what, as long as we're alive. 13, there's two really good talent choices here. Primal Rage, if you go back to what we've been building towards throughout so far, Primal Rage gives you increased attack damage per essence stored, and once you get that level 1 talent done, you have 60 essence. So that means you get a pretty nice buff in the auto attack department. The problem with this talent is that everything that you're doing so far means that once you've used your essence to heal, unless you're getting kills or a globe is nearby, Primal Rage now loses its value, so you don't have a level 13 at that point. A lot of people don't really focus Dehaka's because of his essence and the way that it is, and you kind of burn the resources. If you have a healer in the middle of all that and they don't burst you down and you don't have to use essence, Primal Rage becomes really good. So with that being said, I think that this does mean that if you want to pick Primal Rage, you have to have the right team composition. You have to have a healer. You have to have a lot of circumstances. You have to have the right map to where everything that you're doing doesn't require you to use your essence in the first 5 seconds of a fight, and then therefore reducing your level 13 talent. So I'll bring my attention over to Primal Swarm. Dark Swarm causes enemies hit to lose 10 armor for 0.75 seconds. This is incredible to have this cooldown reduction. There used to be a W build built around this. I don't like that anymore. But if you hit your Q and your W is going off and you can isolate a target, not even using isolation, but if you can grab onto one target and reduce their armor, that's the impact that you're having on a fight. It's up to your team to kind of follow up, but it does also mean that you can do a lot for yourself in that situation. This also means your wave clear goes up. It's not enemy heroes, it's just enemies. So your wave clear goes up, which means that you can rotate faster to fights. You can be in fights faster, but the real impact, of course, is going to be in those team fights. And if you get to a team fight on time because of this, that helps. If you get that armor reduction, it helps. We're talking about a W that has a 10-second cooldown, but it also has a pretty significant uptime because it's 3.5 seconds. So you have a 6.5-second downtime on a 10 armor reduction, which is pretty good. And if you think about 6-second downtime and you think about the cooldown reduction that you're having with drag, by using that, you get auto. Each time that you're using your drag, your W should also be up. And that's, just a natural built-in synergy all around. So all of that I think is really good. Primal Rage, I would say, is plan B for most games. If your team drafted another melee and you have a tank and another melee, you probably need the damage, and Primal Rage can give you that damage. If you have a general composition of a tank, offlaner, and 2 range damage dealers, that's fine. If you're playing with a Thrall or a Zeratul, you don't necessarily need that damage. It's if your team somehow picked another melee, then you wouldn't have damage. So Primal Rage is, if you're playing at lower levels and your team has some crazy draft, it can bring damage to the table only if needed, else Primal Swarm is the way to go. Now at 16, again, I think that there's 2 good options here. If I'm playing against a Jaina, a team that's trying to lock me in place and absolutely obliterate me, I'll go Tunneling Claws. This is highly dependent on the enemy team. If it's a Jaina, if it's a Kael'thas that has somehow gravity lapsed me and then I'm getting obliterated, I need to make my way to safety. More it's against like a Jaina or a team that has a lot of CC or follow-up CC, then I want Tunneling Claws. For all other purposes, though, Elongated Tongue. It's already hard to land a drag. It's slow enough going out that getting some extra range is very helpful in that situation. How you can grow an extra arm. Apparently, you can grow a longer tongue as Dehaka. Anyways, with that, Elongated Tongue is your number 1 choice. Tunneling Claws is as needed. Other than that, Paralyzing Enzymes, I'm not a big fan of this unless you're going against a heavy melee team that you don't need the extra range on. That's rarely ever the case. Tunneling Claws can help you out a lot versus CC heavy compositions. Elongated Tongue for most purposes. Level 20, I've already talked about this when I talked about Isolation. Contagion can be one of the most impactful heroics in the game. This is an actual insane talent that if I land this, and even if I only hit, you don't have to think of it like a mosh pit. Everybody wants a 5-man mosh pit because it looks cool and you can win the game. You can get a 4-man mosh pit and it looks cool and you win the game. Isolation, you don't need a 4-man mosh pit late in the game. Even if it only hits 1, that's still good. But normally there's at least 1 other person nearby. If I can hit 2 people with Isolation, my job is done. I've already removed 2 people from the fight. It is a 3-second slow. 3 seconds or silence. They can't see either. They can't see for 6 seconds. I've removed 2 people from the fight. I don't need to try and hit a 3-4-man Isolation to really change it. It can do that. But overall, Contagion is where it's at. Everything else here, if we were playing competitive and if we were playing Dragonshire, I would preach to you about the value of Apex Predator. However, we're not in that role. Essence Claws is, again, if your team needs that damage, which is very rare, everything that lives up to Contagion is nowhere even close. And Contagion just becomes the best level 20 talent you could possibly go by a mile. If you've built everything to this point, you have extra essence, which means more healing, so longer survivability in a team fight. It means you have more control over the map, which means that you come into a fight charged up and ready to go, which is why you go One Who Collects. You have an impact in terms of stuns with Feeding Frenzy. You have Isolation, which is insane. You have 2 very good level 13 talents that can be very good for both yourself and for the team. Your 16 is a situational one, which just, again, further impacts the team fight or your survivability, which is sometimes needed. And then level 20, game-changing heroic, one of the best game-changing heroics if you land it. It's like landing a Mighty Gust as Falls Dead. It's like landing a big mosh pit. It's fantastic. So these are all things. Again, the one thing that, again, I want to reiterate is you have to be comfortable auto attacking. You have to make sure that you auto, no matter what. Unless it's full, I need to step into a bush and run. You make sure you learn shift commands, right? If you're moving through the map, you want to shift command through bushes for maximum efficiency. Another trick about all globals, if I'm on Cursed Hollow and the next global is bottom and I'm mid, my Z is a very long cooldown. I believe it's 75 seconds. 75 seconds is a long time. I don't want to use this when I know that the next objective is there. I've now eliminated my global value. I would rather walk to the top lane and get to the top lane, miss out on 3 minions, as opposed to Zing to the top, and then there's an objective on the bottom half of the map, and now I have to walk all the way there. I'd rather be late to 3 minions than I would rather be late to a team fight. As every global, you should think about that, is that I don't want to be late to a team fight. If it forces me to miss 3 minions, which is never good, I would rather have one versus the other. I need to make sure that I do that. Cursed Hollow, you can drag giants up to your gate. You don't have to full clear them at that point. You get level 7. I grab the giants. I grab them. I pull them to the gate. They die to the towers. I can make my way down to a fight. I don't need to be there 100% of the time to make sure something dies. Those are all things as a global that you need to say, this is how I should play it, not how I think I need to play it. I don't need to 100% kill those giants. I just need to get them in range so I can go do my job and help my team. All of these things are going to be greater impacts. Dark Swarm, don't think of this primarily as damage. Think about this as a form of mobility to set up a drag, to empower a drag, to be able to live in a fight. Think about it first and foremost as mobility to pass through targets, not as a way of doing damage. Once you start to swap those out, then you'll start to look at Dehaka maybe a little differently. You can be a better team player. You can survive more in those fights. It's going to help. Burrow almost goes without saying. If big damage is coming at you or you need your essence to go off, just press E. Sometimes if you're a Dehaka and you get absolutely pounded, your D is never going to go off, and that really sucks. But anyways, that's Dehaka in a nutshell. Always focus on the global aspect. Always focus on what you can do in a team fight when you're playing an offlaner. Don't think that you're the primary carry. The hard part with Dehaka, again, is he doesn't necessarily bring the most to a team fight. So you better be getting maximum value out of your global, maximum out of your team fight. Else you're going to find your teams behind in soak, or you're going to see that they're losing team fights because you're not doing both at maximum efficiency, which is one of the reasons all the heroes that are meta are consistent. Dehaka in the current meta, with all the solos that have passed him up, is not consistent as a result because of things like cooldowns, because of the lack of CC. I don't care how long you live. If you go Dark Swarm, if you go adaptation, you're doing it wrong because you're not bringing the maximum potential that you can. And all you're doing is proving to everybody that you know how to press your buttons to live long enough. That's not always going to be winning you the game. So that's Dehaka. If you're looking to get out there, get digging.